Alright, hello there, thrill seekers. That was a little piece of a tune I call Close Enough to Foggy Mountain Breakdown. I've been practicing that for weeks, and that, after doing about 18 takes of it this morning, that's the best of the lot. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed it. So today I want to talk about U.G. Krishnamurti. And just from the outset, I want you to know this is not the definitive video about U.G. Krishnamurti. So in case you're new to this channel and you're looking for the definitive video about U.G. Krishnamurti, go somewhere else. This is not the place. This is me talking from my perspective of being a Zen Buddhist practitioner for 11,000 years, well, 40 some years, I think. Has it been? No. Yeah, about 40 years. And having written a bunch of books about Zen Buddhism and kind of dabbled in Krishnamurti, U.G. Krishnamurti. So let me tell you what I know about U.G. Krishnamurti and what I think about U.G. Krishnamurti. So I think I first stumbled across U.G. Krishnamurti on YouTube. I'm pretty sure that's where it was, and I was probably looking for Jiddu Krishnamurti. So Jiddu Krishnamurti, I don't want to go into his whole deal. He was a guy who spoke a lot about stuff that is very similar to what Buddhists talk about, and if you don't know who he was, you'll probably have to go look him up. And there's another Krishnamurti out there who's very similar to that, to Jiddu Krishnamurti, who's U.G. Krishnamurti, and this is U.G. Krishnamurti. This is the only book I have by U.G. Krishnamurti. I had read a bunch of books by Jiddu Krishnamurti in my youth, and my first Zen teacher was a fan of Jiddu Krishnamurti, which gave me more interest in Jiddu Krishnamurti and his philosophy. But I am kind of a latecomer to U.G. Krishnamurti. In fact, it says he died in 2007, so that would probably be around the time I discovered him, I would imagine, around that era. And here's what it says on the back of the book. It says, Uppaluri Gopala Krishnamurti was born on 9th July 1918 in Masulipatanam, a coastal town in Andhra Pradesh, in India. He died on 22nd March 2007 at the age of 89 in, Via Croce, Italy? I don't know. At the villa of a friend. The effect that he had and will continue to have on legions of his admirers is difficult to put into words. With his flowing silvery hair, deep-set eyes, and elongated Buddha-like ears, he was an explosive yet cleansing presence and has been variously described as a wild flower of the earth, a bird in constant flight, an anti-guru, and a cosmic Naxalite? I don't know what a Naxalite is, but there you go. He was one of those. So when I stumbled across his videos, I thought, oh, this guy's kind of interesting. He's very sharp. I think that's how my teacher Nishijima Roshi might have described him. He's very incisive, and he cuts to the chase, and he's really kind of anti-everything. So this got me interested in his work, and I didn't really... Okay, after watching a few of his videos, I got kind of tired of this sort of relentless, almost kind of negativity that kind of comes from him, even though I do think a lot of what he says is very useful and very good. So I didn't look at him for very much until I came across this book when I was traveling in England. It was at this sort of spiritual bookstore in that part of London that's full of, maybe people who've been to London will know this. There's a part of London that's full of used bookstores, and I kind of always like to go there. Anyway, this was in one of these spiritual bookstores, and it was £7, I can tell you because it's written on the inside, £7.95 when I bought it. It looks like it was only published in India, though, and by Penguin Books of India. So his books are kind of hard to come by. And it was this book that made me kind of go, ugh, I don't know about this U.G. Krishnamurti guy, because I hadn't heard his story. His story is very weird. He grew up sort of being Indian. He was around Hindu philosophy, and he met Sri Ramana Maharshi, who's a very famous sort of Indian spiritual teacher, when he was very young, and it seems like he was impressed by Ramana Maharshi. And later on, he started studying, or working with or hanging around listening to the other Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti. And I should point out that now, I didn't know this until I started looking into this, but apparently Indian people, like Japanese people, often put their given name last. And so Krishnamurti, the two Krishnamurtis aren't related. They just happen to have the same given name. It'd be like me and Brad Pitt aren't related, that kind of thing. So they're not related, but Yuji Krishnamurti had been a kind of... I don't know if he sometimes refers to Jiddu Krishnamurti as his teacher. God, my hair's looking like alfalfa right now, isn't it? Anyway, so he studied with him and eventually came to reject Krishnamurti, the other Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti. And then later on, after some other stuff happened, he came back to Jiddu Krishnamurti, and something that he heard in a conversation or a talk by Jiddu Krishnamurti kind of sparked this something or other in him, which happened when he was 49 years old, and he started having all these very strange sort of mystical experiences. And many of them, he refers to them as the calamity. And many of these experiences were extremely painful and weird. Like, for example, he claims to have grown a breast on one side. I think it was the left side. I don't remember. One of his chest, part of his chest grew a breast. He had all these weird marks on his body at exactly the spots where the chakras are supposed to be. And he had all this stuff, and it was apparently very painful and lasted for a couple of years, maybe 3 years, something like that. I don't remember. You'll have to, like I said, this isn't the definitive video on the guy, so you'll have to go look it up yourself if you want to know the details. But after this calamity happens, he claimed to have changed his whole consciousness. And I use the word claimed advisedly. I don't like using the word claimed, because one of the things that interests me and continues to interest me about Yuji Krishnamurti is he doesn't make a lot of claims. He really kind of just is, or was, because he's dead now, himself. And people flock to him and like to hear him, and I guess that's how he made his living. But he didn't make these claims. He didn't say that you should listen to him because these things happened to him. He just thought that it was important and interesting that these things happened to him, and he wanted to kind of make a record of it. But he wasn't trying to say, I now have spiritual authority because these weird things happened to him, which I like about the guy. I think that's really good. And his philosophy, I think, is real interesting. I have to say that I haven't read or absorbed a lot of it. I haven't even finished this book, but I've watched few hours probably in total of his videos, and I kind of got to know what his thing is. And he kind of just, there's an old Ramones song called I'm Against It, and it's just Joey Ramone going blah 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 this and that, and I'm against it, I'm against it, I'm against it. He's against everything, and that song kind of reminds me of Yuji Krishnamurti. He's against everything, but he does seem to have some really deep insights that I think are worth looking at, and if you're interested in the kind of stuff I talk about, you might be interested in him. Now, I've always had this question, ever since I started studying Zen Buddhism, of how to kind of fit people like Jiddu Krishnamurti and Yuji Krishnamurti and Nisargadatta Maharaj and Ramana Maharshi, people I've talked about often, these Indian teachers whose stuff I admire. How do you fit them into Buddhism if you want to do that? It's something you could just decide not to even bother with, but to me it's interesting because my sort of training was in Zen Buddhism. And there is this... in a lot of Buddhist literature, you come across two words that are used fairly frequently, and it's Pratyeka and Shravaka. And these are people that are talked about often in Buddhist sutras in a kind of, I wouldn't say disparaging way, but in a sort of like, those guys kind of way. So it's clear that the Buddhists had a certain amount of admiration. I don't know if admiration is the right word, but they had a certain amount of interest or positive feeling of some kind for these Pratyeka Buddhas and Shravakas. And I'm going to read you the definition of them as I got it from some kind of wait a minute, where the heck is it? Well, I've forgotten where I found this, but it looks like a kind of an Indian version of Wikipedia. It's not it looks very much like Wikipedia, but it seems to be concentrating on India and Indian philosophy. And here's how they define Pratyeka Buddha. Pratyeka Buddha is a solitary realizer who are followers of the basic vehicle. I guess they mean the Hinayana, the lower vehicle, what they call, and more specifically the Pratyeka Buddha Yana, who attain the level of a Pratyeka Buddha Arhat. Arhat is a kind of an enlightened being, by themselves in solitude. According to some early schools of Buddhism and the Mahayana, Pratyeka Buddhas first hear the teachings of the Buddha, then study and reflect upon the 12 links of interdependent origination, which I've done videos about, so I'm not going to talk about that, and accumulate merit for hundreds of kalpas. A kalpa is a really, really long time. They pray to be reborn in a world to which no Buddha has come, and they attain realization without relying on a teacher. They usually teach visually rather than verbally, for example, by displaying miracles such as transforming the upper part of their bodies into fire and the lower part into water. Interesting. And this definition also gives a short definition of a Shravaka. Shravakas accumulate merit for up to 16 lifetimes, and their accumulation of... Yeah, that's not a very good definition, so I'll just give you my off-the-top-of-my-head definition. Shravakas are voice hearers who hear the teachings of the Buddha and then go out and teach by themselves. Now, I've always thought, not always thought, but thought for a long time that people like Ramana Maharshi, the two Krishnamurtis, maybe Nisargadatta Maharaj, might be examples of what these Buddhists in the past have called the Pratyeka Buddha or the Shravaka. I'm not saying that definitively, because in the literature, at least what I've been exposed to, it doesn't really get much more specific than what I just read you about what these people are. But the idea I glean from it is these are people who come to some kind of an enlightenment, but they come to an enlightenment outside of any sort of... I don't like using the word system, but I'll use the word system. They come to it by themselves without following a teacher or without following any sort of guidance. And so their realization, in the way Buddhists tend to look at it, is a bit sus, as the kids say, suspicious. It's not that they are unrealized or that they are phonies or anything like that, or stay away from these people or that kind of idea, but it's the idea that if you come to this sort of realization or these various spiritual realizations without any sort of framework around it, then you might have a tendency to go a little wonky with it. And that... Excuse me if you're a follower of U.G. Krishnamurti and you're going to find this insulting, but that is kind of the way I look at it. When I look at U.G. Krishnamurti, I feel like, yeah, this guy is definitely onto something, but if he had been able to be in the company of others who were also working on that something, he might have come out with a somewhat different approach. And it's hard to say what's better. I took the sort of more semi-traditional Buddhist approach. Mine wasn't even that traditional, but I had two teachers who I followed and who I practiced with. Now, I'm even a little bit outside because I didn't go the monastic route and I didn't fall in with that thing. So I kind of have an affinity for these independent teachers, but I also have an affinity for the Buddhists too. And I find myself not really fully aligned with either camp, even though I have, the various certificates and stuff I showed them on this video channel once to prove that I am a supposedly authorized Buddhist teacher by my teacher Guru Nishijima. Even though I did that, I often feel like, do I really fit in with that kind of thing? I'm not sure. And so I find guys like U.G. Krishnamurti interesting. I don't have a sort of definitive take on UG Krishnamurti, which is kind of what I meant to say at the very outset of this video, except to say that I do find him interesting, and I do find a lot of what he says worthwhile, but there is that kind of sharpness to it, and there's a bit of, well, okay, there is one thing I will say, among the many claims that UG Krishnamurti has made about this experience, this calamity he had, one of the things he says, and he said this more than once, is that after the calamity happened, he no longer had to blink his eyes. Now, before I did this video for you, I just went and clicked on a few UG Krishnamurti videos to have a look, and he blinked his eyes just like everybody else does. You know, I don't know why he was making that claim that he didn't blink anymore, because he blinks all over the place in every video that I ever looked at him. So I don't get the impression that he's a guy who makes grandiose claims. Ziggy, hold on, let me finish this. Or lies about himself. I don't think that's why he claimed that he never blinked. It could be that he just sort of convinced himself that he never blinked anymore, and nobody said, "Hey, UG, I've been sitting in front of you for the last half hour, and you've been blinking all the time." Maybe that. I don't really know. But I find that also fascinating, that he could be so insightful and yet make a claim which is so clearly not true. And I don't think he made this claim to try to enhance his standing with anybody or get people excited about him, because it's a weird thing to try to get people excited about. But there you go. That's my short, brief video about UG Krishnamurti. I hope you didn't mind hearing the weed eater guy back. He's finally stopped as soon as I'm ready to finish the video, but we had to listen to him the whole time, so I hope you didn't mind that. And if you want to donate to me sitting here with the weed eaters talking more, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. That's where I get most of my money to make my living and feed Ziggy and everything else. So I appreciate your support, but as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hi, Ziggy. What do you think of UG Krishnamurti? You blink. I can see you blinking all the time. He blinked too. So you got a lot in common with UG Krishnamurti, don't you? Right, Ziggy? Right? All right, let's go inside and edit the video, and we'll talk to the folks later. See you around, Ziggs.